At 65, I discovered something that changed my life forever, and not in the way anyone expected. I found love with a man 20 years younger than me, and it completely transformed how I see myself and my future. If you've ever felt that your best years are behind you, or that passion and excitement are reserved for the young, this video is for you. I'm going to share 6 unexpected lessons I learned when I fell in love in my 60s with someone younger, and how it challenged everything society told me about aging, romance, and what's appropriate at my age. No matter your age, this story might just change how you think about what's possible in your own life. When I turned 65, I had accepted the narrative that society had written for me. Retirement, grandchildren, book clubs, and the occasional cruise, the quiet, predictable life of a woman my age. I had been divorced for over a decade and hadn't seriously dated since. I'd convinced myself that the chapter of romance in my life was firmly closed. What I didn't realize was how many assumptions I'd internalized about aging. I thought passion was for the young. I believed that my desirability had an expiration date that had long passed. I accepted that my role now was to fade gracefully into the background, to be the supportive mother and grandmother, but never again the romantic lead in my own life. Then I met him. He was 45, intelligent, accomplished, and for reasons I couldn't initially understand, interested in me. Not in a patronizing way, but with genuine attraction and respect. Our meeting wasn't dramatic, just a conversation at a friend's dinner party that extended long after other guests had left. What was dramatic was the internal revolution it sparked in me. This relationship forced me to confront deeply held beliefs about aging, about what I deserved, and about the possibilities that still lay ahead. It wasn't easy. There were judgments, doubts, both from others and from myself, and moments of profound vulnerability. But there were also incredible discoveries that I want to share with you today. Discoveries that might help you question your own limiting beliefs, whether you're 25, 45, or 85. Stay with me until the end of this video, because the final lesson I learned might completely transform how you think about aging and relationships. If you've ever caught yourself thinking it's too late for something you desire, this could be the perspective shift you need. I'll be honest with you, this isn't just about romance with a younger person. It's about challenging the artificial limitations we place on ourselves as we age. It's about rediscovering possibilities you might have written off years ago. And even if you're younger, watching this might help you see your own aging, or the aging of your parents, in a completely different light. The insights I'm about to share speak to something universal: our fear of becoming irrelevant, and our deep desire to continue growing and experiencing joy at every stage of life. Ready? Let's dive into the 6 unexpected lessons I learned when love found me at 65. Lesson number 1: the moment you define yourself primarily by your age, you've already limited who you can become. When David and I first started spending time together, I kept waiting for him to see me as I saw myself, as a 65-year-old woman, with all the baggage I believed that carried. I'd look in the mirror and catalog my wrinkles, my silver hair, the softening of my jawline. I'd mentally calculate the 20-year gap between us and feel a flash of shame. During our 3rd dinner together, he mentioned wanting to travel to Japan, and without thinking, I said, "Oh, I'm too old for that kind of adventure." The look of genuine confusion on his face stopped me. "Too old in what way?" he asked. "Do you have a health condition that would make travel difficult?" I didn't. "Are you not interested in Japanese culture?" I was fascinated by it. "Then, what does your age have to do with it?" That simple question cracked something open in me. I realized I'd been using my age as a blanket excuse to avoid stepping outside my comfort zone. It wasn't my body holding me back, it was my mindset. I'd accepted a narrative about what was appropriate for someone my age without ever questioning it. With David, I began noticing how often I used phrases like "at my age" or "women my age don't." It became clear that I'd reduced my entire complex identity to a number. Meanwhile, he was seeing me as a whole person, with passions, opinions, desires, and yes, wrinkles too. The shift didn't happen overnight, but gradually I began introducing myself to others, without immediately mentioning my age, something I realized I'd been doing reflexively, almost as a disclaimer. I started making decisions based on my interests and energy levels, not on what seemed age-appropriate. Ask yourself, how often do you preface your desires or decisions with, "at my age"? What might be possible if you stopped defining yourself primarily by how many years you've lived? Lesson number 2. The judgment you fear most is often a reflection of others' insecurities, not your reality. The first time David and I attended a social event as a couple, I was terrified. I spent hours choosing an outfit that wouldn't look like I was trying too hard or dressing too young. I rehearsed responses to the questions and comments I was sure would come. I was prepared for disapproval, for whispers, for pitying glances. What I wasn't prepared for was being completely ignored by most people. The dramatic confrontations I'd imagined simply didn't materialize. Later, my friend Jane pulled me aside. "Sandra keeps saying it's inappropriate," she told me. "But honestly, I think she's just jealous. Her husband hasn't looked at her that way in years." That conversation was illuminating. The judgment I feared most wasn't about propriety, it was about envy. Some people were uncomfortable with my happiness, not because it was wrong, but because it highlighted what was missing in their own lives. Of course, not all reactions were positive. My own sister suggested David must be after my money. I'm a retired teacher, so that was almost laughable. My son was concerned I'd get hurt. And yes, occasionally I'd catch a disapproving glance from a stranger when we held hands in public. But here's what I learned. I could either live my life seeking universal approval, or I could live authentically. I couldn't have both. And the cost of choosing approval was giving up a relationship that brought me profound joy and growth. The most surprising discovery was how my confidence affected others' reactions. When I stopped apologizing for my relationship, through my body language and words, when I stopped expecting judgment people took their cues from, my comfort became their comfort. The truth is, people will always have opinions about how you should live, especially as you age. Their opinions say more about their fears and limitations than about your choices. Ask yourself, whose approval are you seeking for the choices that matter most to you? What might change if you decided that approval was optional? Lesson number 3. Passion doesn't diminish with age. It transforms into something potentially more profound. Let's address the elephant in the room. When people learn about my relationship with a younger man, there's often an unspoken question lingering in their eyes. What about the physical aspect? There's a persistent myth that sensuality and desire naturally fade with age, particularly for women. I had internalized this myth so completely that I had essentially retired my body from the realm of pleasure and connection. I dressed for comfort and convenience. I thought of my body primarily in terms of its health issues and limitations, not its capacity for joy. When David and I became intimate, I was terrified. I considered suggesting we keep the lights off. I worried about being compared to younger women. What I discovered instead was a type of physical connection I had never experienced before, even in my youth. With the confidence of 6 decades of life, I found I could communicate more honestly about what brought me pleasure. Without the insecurities of my younger years, I could be present in ways that had been impossible before. And with the perspective that comes from having lived through loss and grief, each moment of connection felt incredibly precious. Yes, my body has changed. There are considerations now that didn't exist when I was 30. But what I've lost in physical youth, I've gained in awareness, confidence, and the ability to be truly present. What society rarely discusses is how intimacy evolves as we age, how it can become richer, more nuanced, more rooted in deep knowing of oneself and one's partner. The physical dimension of my relationship with David isn't a pally imitation of youthful passion. It's something altogether different and in many ways more satisfying. This lesson extended beyond romance. I became more appreciative of all physical pleasures, the feel of sun on my skin, the taste of good food, the rhythm of movement when I dance. By reclaiming my body as a source of joy rather than just a problem to manage, every sensory experience became richer. Ask yourself, have you unconsciously retired your body from the realm of pleasure? What might change if you approached physical joy as an evolving adventure rather than something with an expiration date? Lesson number 4. The most exciting chapters of your life may still be unwritten. 6 months into our relationship, David suggested, we take a pottery class together. I laughed and told him I wasn't creative. "You've never tried pottery," he pointed out. "How do you know?" The truth was, I had spent decades telling myself a very specific story about who I was. Practical, academic, responsible, not artistic, not adventurous, not spontaneous. Reluctantly, I agreed to try one class. 3 years later, my ceramic pieces are selling in a local gallery. This wasn't about hidden talent. It was about being willing to revise the story I'd been telling about myself for 65 years. This pattern repeated itself in various ways. I had told myself I wasn't a traveler, yet now I've visited 9 countries with David. I had decided I wasn't good with technology, yet I now manage our travel blog. Each time I tried something new, I was confronted with how arbitrarily I had defined my capabilities and interests. What I realized was that somewhere in my 50s, I had mentally closed the book on my own development. I was still learning in an academic sense, reading books, attending lectures, but I had stopped exploring new facets of my identity. I had stopped asking, what else might I become? This revelation wasn't just about discovering new hobbies. It was about recognizing that my identity wasn't fixed, that I was still evolving, still capable of surprising myself, still becoming. The relationship with David was the catalyst, but the real transformation was in how I viewed my own possibilities. I stopped seeing my future as a gentle decline into old age and started seeing it as an open field of potential experiences and growth. The irony is that by opening myself to continued evolution, I've discovered aspects of myself that had been there all along, dormant beneath layers of "that's not who I am, and it's too late for that." Ask yourself, what stories have you been telling about who you are and what you're capable of? Which of those stories might be due for revision? What might still be waiting to emerge in you? Lesson number 5. The generational gap isn't just a challenge, it's an opportunity for extraordinary growth. One evening, David and I got into a heated debate about social media. From my perspective, it was primarily a waste of time, a shallow substitute for real connection. From his, it was a powerful tool for maintaining relationships and sharing ideas. Neither of us was entirely right or wrong, but our perspectives were shaped by the different eras in which we had come of age. Initially, these kinds of differences felt like obstacles. I worried that the generation gap would eventually create an unbridgeable distance between us. What I didn't anticipate was how these different viewpoints would enrich both our lives. Through David's eyes, I gained a fresh perspective on technologies I had dismissed. He introduced me to online communities of artists that have become a significant source of inspiration and friendship. Meanwhile, my experiences provided him with historical context for current events and a deeper appreciation for face-to-face connections. This exchange of perspectives extended beyond just our relationship. I found myself bridging generational divides in other areas of my life, having more meaningful conversations with my adult children, connecting with younger colleagues, in my volunteer work, even developing a different kind of relationship with my teenage grandchildren. What I came to understand is that different generations don't just have different references and preferences, they often have fundamentally different ways of seeing the world. When approached with curiosity rather than judgment, these differences become opportunities for growth rather than sources of conflict. There's a special kind of learning that happens when you're in close relationship with someone from a different generation, a broadening of perspective that can't be gained from reading books or watching documentaries. It requires the vulnerability of admitting that your way of seeing things is just one possibility among many. This lesson has been humbling and exhilarating. At 65, when I thought my worldview was pretty much set, I discovered it could still expand in ways I never imagined. Ask yourself, how diverse are the generational perspectives in your close relationships? What might you learn from deepening your connections with people significantly older or younger than yourself? Lesson number 6, and perhaps the most important, love in later life is as much about courage as it is about chemistry. When I was younger, I thought love was something that happened to you, a force of nature that swept you away. What I've learned through my relationship with David is that mature love is also a series of choices, often requiring tremendous courage. 2 years into our relationship, David received a job offer in another state. It was a significant opportunity, but it meant uprooting my comfortable life, leaving my community, my routines, my support system. The younger me might have seen this as romantic, dropping everything for love. The 67-year-old me saw all the practical complications and genuine risks. After weeks of soul-searching, I decided to move with him. Not because I couldn't live without him, or because our passion was irresistible, but because I consciously chose growth over comfort, possibility over certainty. It was the most terrifying decision I've made in decades, and the most liberating. This is what I've come to understand about love in this chapter of life. It requires a clearer-eyed courage than the love of youth. You have more to lose, more awareness of what can go wrong, and fewer illusions about happily ever after. But you also have the wisdom to choose love with full awareness of its costs and complexities. There are days when the age difference between us becomes apparent in challenging ways. There are moments when I still battle the internalized voice that says I don't deserve this happiness. There are practical concerns about the future that we must navigate with honesty. But each day I make the decision to be fully present in this relationship. Not because I'm swept away by emotion, but because I've carefully weighed what matters most to me in this one precious life I have. This is perhaps the most profound gift of finding love later in life. The opportunity to choose it with the full wisdom of your years. To love not just with your heart, but with your hard-won insight about what truly matters. Ask yourself, what would love look like in your life if you approached it as a conscious choice, rather than something that merely happens to you? What possibilities might open up if you had the courage to choose growth over comfort? Looking back on the journey of these past 3 years, I'm struck by how fundamentally my perspective has changed. I entered my 60s believing I knew who I was and what my future held. I had unconsciously accepted limitations that were not based on my actual circumstances, but on cultural messages about aging. The 6 lessons I've shared today: that age is a number, not an identity; that others' approval is optional; that physical intimacy evolves rather than expires; that your story isn't finished; that generational differences offer opportunities for growth; and that love in later life is a courageous choice, have transformed not just my relationship, but every aspect of how I live. I want to be clear. This isn't about suggesting everyone should seek a younger partner. It's about questioning the artificial boundaries we place on our lives as we age. It's about recognizing that growth, passion, and new beginnings remain possible at every stage of life. Whatever your age, I hope something in my story inspires you to examine the limitations you've accepted without question. The most powerful barriers to a fulfilling life are often not external circumstances, but our own beliefs about what's possible or appropriate for us. Remember, the clock is always ticking, regardless of whether you choose courage or comfort. Why not choose possibility? If this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear about a limitation you've challenged in your own life. Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If you found value in these reflections, please give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need this message. Too often we accept society's narrative about aging without question, and your share might help someone see new possibilities for themselves. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more content that challenges conventional thinking about life's different chapters. We have upcoming videos on reinvention after retirement, navigating intergenerational friendships, and finding purpose at every age. Thank you for joining me on this deeply personal journey. Remember, it's never too late to surprise yourself.